I love when shows do that and then you kind of get to go back and connect the dots and be like, oh, that's where they were going this whole time! Hey guys, it's Kristen, and today we're talking about season 1 of Netflix's new show, Russian Doll. Just a heads up that there will probably be some spoilers coming your way, so you have been warned. Co-created by Natasha Lyonne, Amy Poehler, and Leslie Headland, Russian Doll stars Lyonne as Nadia, a video game designer who is celebrating her 36th birthday, but with a Groundhog's Day, Happy Death Day type of twist. The difference here is that the timeline doesn't reset until Nadia dies, which she's bound to over and over and over again. When I first started Russian Doll, I have to admit I was not really feeling it. I got through like the first episode and I was like, I don't think this is for me, but I had heard that at least by the third episode you're gonna be into it. So I was like, let me just keep going. I restarted, got into a whole new mindset, and I really think that by episode 3 you really kind of get sucked into this story. So if you're like me and you're not so sure after the first episode or two, give it just one more episode, because I think that this dark comedy and just how deep it really gets will draw you in. Throughout the first few episodes, we're really just kind of setting the stage for what this story is about. You know, Nadia is stuck in this time loop and she's trying to figure out why, what happened, what is this? She's like, is this being caused by bad drugs? Is this because of supernatural events that are going on maybe in this synagogue turned apartment complex that they're having this party in? Or is she just losing her mind? I think at first look this is your classic Groundhog's Day style storyline, but then the story really takes a turn, adding a trippy and deeper storyline that really turns this genre on its head. One of the things I really loved about this show in particular is how detailed they were in terms of adding clues and hints and things that are going to come back into the storyline and actually mean something. I love when shows do that and then you kind of get to go back and connect the dots and be like, oh, that's where they were going this whole time! We're mainly following Nadia in like the first half of this show, but I think things really start coming together when we're introduced to Alan, played by Charlie Barnett, in episode 4. There was this drunk guy in the deli that Nadia saw very briefly in the first episode, and it turns out that that guy was Alan, and that he also is dealing with the same time loop situation that Nadia is dealing with. I just love when they do stuff like that because it's like, wow, you could really see the detail that they put into these scenes to set up these situations. And as we dive deeper into these episodes, we learn that Nadia and Alan are both kind of dealing with similar issues. They both have personal problems that they can't get over. They both have these very self-destructive tendencies that are essentially what keeps them alone. And I think if you were to like write a paper or a dissertation or something on this series, you could definitely say that the situation that they're dealing with these loops could be a metaphor for, you know, addiction or mental illness, or what happens when you just end up pushing people out of your life. When it comes down to Nadia, I think Natasha Lyonne really gives us what she's best known for, and then some. Nadia just has this painful history that she's trying to drown out with like drugs and meaningless sex and alcohol, and it's clearly not working very well for her. But Lyonne plays Nadia in a way that she's never unlikable, even when she is being selfish, and you really do get to see this dramatic growth, especially when she gets to know Alan more. She also never loses her humor, which I think is really great. The show has this kind of dark comedy, dry wit to it, and again, even though they don't really give you all of the answers right up front, they hint at things, they tease things that are to come, so when we start really learning about Nadia's background in episode 7, it's like, okay, we understand and we can feel for why she's so closed off from people. With Alan, Charlie Barnett really goes on a journey. You know, he's this very stiff, perfectionist type of guy, and over time he really starts to kind of discover who he is and just kind of like chill out a little bit. It's interesting because the two of them are so similar yet so different. You know, while Nadia is trying to kind of close herself off from other people, Alan is having a hard time keeping the relationships that he has. I think they're just a very unlikely but kind of necessary duo. They like balance each other out. As we get further into the storyline, this loop that they're in starts to crumble. You know, we see animals disappear, fruit appears to be rotten, people start disappearing. Together, Nadia and Alan realize that they need to find closure from the traumas of the past that are still haunting them, as well as help each other live through the night when they both relive their first deaths. Alan has to learn how to accept and move on from the relationship that he had with Beatrice, who's played by Lyonne's Orange is the New Black co-star Daska Polanco, while Nadia has to face the terrible childhood that she had with her mom and just kind of come to terms with the fact that she needs to forgive herself, especially because a lot of the things she's blaming herself for are not actually her fault. She was just a little kid, and she's kind of putting all this blame on herself that isn't warranted. What I think is really interesting about this show is who the real villain is. It's not Mike, that awful womanizer guy who has a connection to both of them. It's really your own brain. It's your own inner demons that's the villain of this show. And I think watching it, it's so easy to be like, oh well, look at all these terrible things that have happened to them. It's so easy to allow them to get into these self-destructive situations and be like, oh yeah, that's warranted. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think deep down, this show is really about like forgiveness and forgiving yourself and finding people that you can connect with and realizing that you don't have to like solve all of your problems on your own. I think once they let things go and realize that like it's okay to have, you know, connections with someone and they can kind of be that rock for each other, that's when things start to really fix themselves and they are able to survive because of that. I want to get into the finale of the show because I thought it was really interesting, and I think it opens up this huge can of worms of like what could happen next if this show continues. I think what's really interesting here is that Nadia and Alan are actually given the opportunity to take everything that they've learned through this whole process and actually implement it. A big theme of this show is kind of how it's kind of easy to die. We see them die over and over and over again in these different situations, but it's kind of really difficult to live. I think we get to see that in how Alan can't move on from his relationship. I think we see that in how Nadia refuses to continue a relationship with her ex-boyfriend and doesn't want to meet his daughter because she's just afraid of like kind of doing anything in life. And one of the things that made a lot of sense to me was when they talked about Mike being this whole where you don't choose anything. He's like, the absence of a choice is just going with Mike. And I think it was so easy to just go with Mike, the non-choice, and it's so much harder to actually live and make the choices. So the fact that we get to see that and it comes full circle, I think is just really a powerful message. In this last loop before everything kind of comes crashing in, they are able to make the necessary changes and make those choices to, I guess you could say, make the choice to live. And in doing that, they're able to actually save themselves. But then they get separated into these two different timelines. And now, the version of them that's been going through these loops has to help the other version of the person who hasn't yet. They don't even know each other anymore. And this is kind of their opportunity to help save the other person now. The series ends with these original versions of themselves trusting their loop versions, and from there I think the finale kind of is up in the air a little bit about what you think happened. Did the two timelines merge together and now they're back together and everything's fine? Or are Loop Nadia and Loop Alan still separated and we need to find a way to get them back in the same timeline? And where does that leave us for a possible season 2? The creators of this show pitched 3 seasons to Netflix, and I mean, with the amount of positive reaction that I've seen so far on this show, I think it's a no-brainer that we're gonna at least get a season 2. But you know, this show plays with space and time, so I think that there are a lot of different avenues that they could go in the future. We can continue following Nadia and Alan in their story and diving even deeper. Maybe they would do a whole anthology thing where they give us a whole new group of people to follow that are dealing with a similar situation. Or maybe just throw something else in there completely and shock us all. Because this, I think, definitely was a show that took it to another level that we haven't really seen before for this kind of genre, and I think that's really awesome. I always love seeing people breaking the boundaries of film and television and doing something a little bit different that maybe you don't expect. I did really enjoy the show. It took me a little bit to get into the beginning of it, but once I was in there, I was hooked. And once you get into like the last few episodes of the show, it's just like, man, this is deep. You know, it's definitely a dark comedy, there is some humor, but I really think that it goes there and tackles some topics that even I'm still trying to figure out, you know, what exactly was going on in certain situations. I think there's a lot that this show can do in going even deeper in terms of the themes and the storytelling and just this concept in general of like how this happened to Alan and Nadia and what that kind of means in terms of human connection and living a meaningful life. I would love to know what you guys thought about Russian Doll, so make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and click that subscribe button because I come out with new videos every week. See ya!